Okay. Hey, welcome. Welcome. It's good to have you all here, and we know many of you are here. Some of you are visiting. Some of you were invited, are here to support Peter and Angela and Holly, and we love that you are here. If I'm new, my name is Grant, and I'm one of the pastors here at the church, and we've been working our way through a book called Luke. That's it. Very basic name. It is the Gospel of Luke. This is a book about Jesus' life. It's part of 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that talk through Jesus' life, all of the miracles that he performed, his teaching, the way in which he encourages and challenges people to live inside of the kingdom, and also works us through his death and his resurrection. Abby, at the very beginning of the service, invited you all to Easter, to Palm Sunday, to Good Friday, and Easter Sunday services where we remember the death of Jesus and celebrate again his resurrection. And so again, just an invitation to that. But let me just say welcome. We're glad that you're here. We have coffee and tea. So I don't know if you're looking for coffee. Eric is out there, and he didn't know that I was going to call him out, but he's just dropping kids off. And so he's waving. There's coffee at that back wall, okay? And so if at any point you want to get up, move around, find some of that, that would be great. We love that for you. We want you to feel welcome and wanted and at home here. So the way this works is I read from the Bible, spend a little bit of time reflecting on that together, and then we're going to sing a few more songs. We're going to pray, and then we're going to go and we're going to love and enjoy that cake and continue to celebrate Holly's birthday. So let me pray, just as a way of shifting us now into this time. And then we will continue. God, thank you for your love and for your grace that we get to witness day after day inside of community. Thanks for all of what community means and all of the goodness that there is to experience inside of it. Thanks that at our greatest moments of joy and celebration, you have designed it so that there'd be a community around us celebrating and cheering and laughing and applauding and giving thanks. And thanks that at our lowest, in the midst of grief and sorrow and wonder and doubt and all of life's uncertainties, you've designed it that there be a community to rally around and encourage and pray for and remind us of your love. And so, we know, we kind of stumble in from our weeks, and some of us are feeling the joy and the celebration, and some of us are feeling the doubt and the wonder and the uncertainty of it, and many of us find ourselves somewhere in between. God, thanks that you've designed it so that we would gather together and worship, gather together and meet you here in this place and see you in each other and have folks come alongside and encourage, remind us of your love. So God, that's what I'm praying for today. I pray that you'd remind us of your love, how wild it is. And God, I pray that you would speak to each one of us, no matter where we are in life's journey. Remind us that we, each one of us, are called by you, the beloved. So I pray these things in the strong name of Jesus. Amen. I think, Justin, I forgot to plug this in over here. Oh, well, then we're good. Or not. But I'm going to continue either way. So let's read. We're reading in Luke 15, and we're going to finish that chapter. This is the story. In my Bible, it's called the Parable of the Lost Son. If you want to follow along on a phone, that'd be great. We've got some Bibles at the back if you'd like, and it'll be on this screen for sure at some point, hopefully on the others as well. Jesus continued. He says, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back, safe and sound. The older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So I'm going to do something today that I probably won't ever do again. I'm going to play the piano in front of you all. I had a very brief tutorial just to double check my math. But if I were to play this for you. How does that make you feel? Not very good, right? I mean, that's probably why that's the last time I won't be allowed to play the piano again. You all know, at least most of us know, that song is what? Unfinished. Unresolved. It's left hanging. You know how it ends. Many of you hummed it. Dun, 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 dun. It goes, da, 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 is the way it's supposed to end. And unless you conclude and hit that final, it's a C, by the way, in that version of it, though I'm told not in the original one. Correct, great, good. Checks out. You know that it's unresolved. And you feel like it's unresolved. You can feel the tension of waiting for that final note to fall. This parable is one of the most famous parables that Jesus ever told. And the funny thing about this parable that Jesus told, that is now become one of, if not the greatest, the most famous parable, is that it is left unresolved. There's no ending to this parable that feels like a resolution. One of the most famous parables, we talk about it all the time in the church, yet there is no ending. We might want for there to be an ending. We might be waiting for an ending, but it's left unresolved. And Jesus does that for a very specific reason. When parables are left unresolved, we are meant to find our way into that parable in a very real and tension-filled, how is this going to end kind of way. When parables are left without an ending, it's left so that you yourself participate in the parable, trying to come up with and figure out what the ending might be. But we want, at least I want, for this parable to end. Instead, what we get is this line, my son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours, and it's beautiful. We said, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And the reason we leave this parable unresolved, or we want for it to be and maybe feel resolved, is that so often we read this as the parable of the lost son. We read it as a parable of one son. We read the son and the lost son, the younger brother who runs off and wastes all of his father's money, as the main character in the parable. We think, that's the dude, that's the guy. I'm supposed to be like him. And to a certain extent, you're supposed to see yourself in him, yes. But we're left wondering at the end of this parable questions like, what about the older brother? Like, will the older brother enter the party? Does he listen to his father? Does he rejoin the celebration? Does he find his way back in, or does he stay outside? And does he stay and sit with his resentment and bitterness and then walk away? Like, what about the two brothers, younger and older? Like, are they reconciled? Is there a relationship there that is mended? And what does that continue to look like moving forward? Like, does the older brother finally accept that his younger kid brother's back home and that's worth being happy about? How will the father's relationship change with his two sons? How will it develop and grow? His newfound relationship with the younger son who's home, and his now newfound relationship with the older son who's become bitter. We don't know. We're not told. Jesus just ends the parable and never tells us. But he does it, like I said, on purpose. And we are meant to find our way in and wonder about our place in the parable. Luke 15 contains 3 parables. In fact, 3 that we've now dealt with in 2 weeks: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and now the lost son. And they're Jesus' response to this not so subtle criticism that's being thrown his way from some religious leaders. And so earlier on in the chapter, in Luke 15, verse 2, this is what happens. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, so like this religious elite, they muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So here's Jesus, and he's sitting with tax collectors and sinners, and he's not only sitting with them, but he's eating with them. He's sharing a table with them, and here are also the religious elite, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, muttering to themselves. Like, look what he's doing. This dude welcomes sinners, and he eats with them. Like, what is happening? And last week what we found was Jesus' response. He says, like, of course I do. You bet I do? Like, absolutely. Guess what? He says the party in heaven when one of these sinners and one of these tax collectors is found is bigger than you could ever imagine. And so he talks about this lost coin that is searched for and found. And he talks about this lost sheep that is searched for and found. And we talked about, Pastor Justin talked about a lost Lego that was lost and searched for and found. Like, you give up nothing, you give up everything rather to find the thing. And Jesus says there's a greater party happening in heaven when one of these sinners and tax collectors comes to God, bigger than you could ever imagine. So Jesus says, listen, the party is like a shepherd. It's like a shepherd who lost a sheep and then rejoiced when he found it. And that party is like a woman who searched for her lost coin and then rejoiced when she found it. And that party is like a man who had 2 sons. See, this is not primarily a story about 2 sons. It's not a story of the younger brother and the older brother. It's not a story of the younger brother who squanders everything and then comes back in to the fold of the father. And it's not a story about the older brother who is bitter and resentful and just watching from the outside, like, when's it going to be my turn? This is a story about the father. It's a story about a loving father who moves toward both of his lost sons. And it's a story about a loving God who moves toward us and toward you when you and I are stuck in the mess of our lostness, no matter what that lostness looks like. And so the question that we need to be wrestling with, that I need to be wrestling with, is this: which son are you more like? Not, am I like one of the sons? But which one? Where do you find yourself today? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the younger son, we're going to look at the older son, and then we're going to look at the father. And again, I say this too often. This is the closest you'll get to a 3-point sermon from me. Jesus continued. There was a man, a father, who had 2 sons. The story has always been about the father. The younger one of those 2 said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." And so he divided his property between them. "Father, give me my share." of the estate. And like, if you're highlighting stuff, my share. To ask for your inheritance, at any point, let alone in Jesus' day, before your father had died, was the equivalent of saying to your dad, Dad, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. You are better to me if you would just die. You are better off dead. Because I'd really, at the end of the day, I'd really rather just the stuff that you've amassed and accumulated, I know it will be mine eventually, so can we just get on with that transaction? And can I just have what is mine, at least what I feel like is mine now? And there's a scholar who went around, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later in the sermon, Kenneth Bailey. And Kenneth Bailey spent a lot of his life as a theologian studying the stories of Jesus and the practices within family culture in the Middle East. And what Kenneth Bailey says of this request is that, this request, to us, it's like, oh, that's awkward. I'm not sure how I would respond to that. This request would have, in Jesus' day, as he's telling the story, been responded to by either the father just chasing him out of the house, banishing him, or even beating him so that he would run away. What the son has just said is, Dad, I'd really rather you would be dead now. Just give me my stuff. So in fact, the more scandalous thing in Jesus' parable isn't that the son comes and asks for it, which makes us feel awkward. The more scandalous thing is what happens next when the father says, so he divided his property. And he gave it to them. So things like this isn't like, okay, I've got to sell some stock and maybe liquidate some investments and got this investment property over there, and we can deal with that. This is the land that they live on and have worked and farmed. This is, in the Greek, it's actually the term bios, closer to biology than it is to a physical thing, asset management. What Jesus is saying is that the father literally divided his property, in a sense, himself, the land that he has, divides it, and then gives the son his share. And from there, one of two things would either have had to have happened. So either the father divides the land, sells some of it, and again gives the share to his younger son, or he, the father, divides it, gives the land to his son, and then his son turns around and sells it. If you had two sons when you died, your estate would have been divided. The oldest would get 2/3, and the youngest or the younger would get 1/3. And we might not like it, but that's just how it was. And so again, as we continue reading, so not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country. And there it says he squandered his wealth in wild living. So there's 3 movements, and each of them get more atrocious in a sense, or more scandalous in terms of what's happening. First, the son comes and he asks, Father, give me my share of the estate. And you go, not great. More scandalous, the father actually obliges his son and divides his property and gives him the 1/3, and then the son leaves. He takes it and he goes. And so he's not only rejecting his father, he's not only rejecting his tradition, he is worse than that, leaving and abandoning them for a far-off, distant country. For a Jewish son, one of the most important traditions that you could live up to and fulfill in your life was to take care of your father until he died. And then make sure in his death he was honored in the right way. And that process took over a year after the father had died. And so for this son to just get up and take all that he has and leave is actually, of the 3, the greatest of the moves. The son leaves, he has to reject his home, he has to reject his tradition, but also he has to reject his family and his obligation. This isn't like a young man wanting just to see the world and then finally maybe make his way home. We move away from home all the time, and we celebrate it. We're go off to university, and we celebrate that. And then we become empty nesters, and we don't know what to do with our lives, and I'm living in fear of that day. But we celebrate that launch. And that was not the case. So this son, he goes and he lives in a distant country, and there he squanders his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, everything is gone. There's a severe famine. The younger son is the rebellious one. He's the one who distances himself. He's the one who does have to leave. He's the one who wants to figure out his own way. But before we start distancing ourselves from him, the younger son, I think we need to ask ourselves where we might do this in our own lives. Because I don't know about you, but probably not many of us wake up one day and say, to our dads at least, just give me all the inheritance now. Let's just get this thing going, get the show on the road. And I don't think many of us wake up every morning or any morning and say to God one day, God, I don't want you. I just want your stuff. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to go. I'm going to be done with you completely. But I do think one of the things we struggle with is saying to God, God, I want the benefit of knowing you without the relationship that you invite and call and challenge me into. We say much more subtly, God, I want the life that you say you can give me, but I need to find it my own way, and I need to be in control of my own path. Or God, I want the peace that is possible and you speak about, but I don't want to surrender control in order to get there. So if I could just hold on to the things that I need to hold on to, and you could still give me that peace, that would be fantastic. Maybe we say, I want meaning, but don't talk to me about obedience. I want my life to matter, but don't talk to me about changing anything. God, I want your blessings, but not the authority that you would have over my life. That's our, in many cases, distant country. We leave home every time that we look for life and for love somewhere other than God. And at first, that life feels like freedom. So here's this dude, he's running around. Life looks great. It's I'm doing the thing I always wanted to do. My dad listened to me. He gave me the money. Great, fantastic. And he goes and he squanders it. Wild living. He spends everything. And for a while, maybe it feels like life. At first, it feels like freedom. The son gets to the distant country. It's exciting, maybe even full of possibility. Feels good for a bit. But then there was a severe famine. Real life set in for this kid. The money runs out, the famine comes, and what once felt like freedom for him starts to feel like emptiness. Henry Nouwen, who has a brilliant book on this called The Return of the Prodigal Son, puts it like this. He says, I am the prodigal. I am the prodigal son every time I search for unconditional love where it cannot be found. You are the prodigal son. Every time you search for unconditional love where it cannot be found. See, the younger son isn't just rebellious. He's not just like a rebel on a road that's going to lead him, for a certain while away and then maybe back toward. He's not just this kind of, I got to figure life out he's hungry. He's desperate. He is searching for something. He is hungry for love, and he's hungry for identity, something to make him him. He's hungry for something to tell him that his life matters. And you and I are hungry for love and for our life to matter and to have an identity that is firm and safe and secure that we can step into and grow into and live from. We are hungry for the thing that God has created us for. But the reality is that the farther you run from the place where God is, the farther you go from home, the less you're able to hear God's voice that calls you loved. The further you run, the less likely you are to hear God's voice echoing, reminding you that you are loved. And so the less you hear God's voice reminding you that you are loved, the more you press on and forward away from the place where you can experience God's love. What are some signs that maybe you've left home? Well, now and in this book, he has a whole long list, and I just want to name a few of them for us. He says anger, resentment, jealousy, lust, greed, revenge, seeking revenge in someone else. Those are signs that you've spiritually, emotionally, mentally left home, left the place where God's voice is clear and echoes over and over again in your ears and in your heart that you are loved more than you could ever earn or hope for or imagine. The younger son has left home. And it's in and during the severe famine, he says, in that whole country, he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out, citizens of that country. And then he longs to fill his stomach. And then he says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? He comes back around. He regrets his decision. He feels the weight of it. He sits with like the emptiness of it. He's hungry. And he's so hungry that he goes and he hires himself out and he begins feeding pigs. So the depth to which a Jewish man would have to go to take care of and tend and sleep and then contemplate eating the food of pigs, which were deemed unclean, starts to give you an idea of how far from home he's become. So he comes to his senses. He says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here am I starving to death. He says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to set out and I'm going to go back to my father, and I am going to say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And then he says, I'm going to come up with a plan. I'm not going to go home empty-handed. Well, I'm going to go home empty-handed, but I'm not going to go without a plan. He says, make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. Here's his plan. His plan is simple. He says, I'm going to return to my father's house and I am going to beg to be made a hired servant. I'm going to beg just to be let in a little bit. He's like, I'm not going to assume, I'm not going to ask for, I'm not even going to pretend to be this father's son any longer. He's like, I've lost that. What I'm going to do is I am going to earn everything back. So he goes back to his dad and he says, hey, would you make me a hired servant? A hired servant isn't like a slave or someone who would live in the household. This was a day laborer, somebody who was hired day after day, and actually in the beginning hired to be an apprentice, to learn a trade and learn a skill, and then to be paid a daily wage for each day that they worked. And so essentially his plan is to say, Dad, I'm going to fix it. I will pay you back. I will prove that I'm worthy. I will try to convince you that I can do the thing that I have abandoned. Like, I will make it up to you. And here's the thing, and I want us to hold on to this. We're going to go to the older son. It says, even in this younger son's return, he still doesn't understand the heart of the father. And I think you and I tend to think about our relationship to God in the same way. God, I've sinned. I've done A, B, or C. I'm struggling in this area, and this area. Here's what I'll do. I'm going to never do that thing again. Instead, I'm going to do A, B, and C. I'm going to make a list, and I'm going to commit myself to an entire different way of living, and we bargain with God. God, let me back in. I want to experience just a little bit of what you have, but in order to do that, I know I'm guilty, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to earn everything that I can, and in that, the younger son, rather, he just doesn't understand the heart of the father. So now we're going to move to the older son. The older son, meanwhile, it says. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. The older son's been home working. He's been doing the thing. He's been, quote, responsible, unquote. He's been living his life in exactly the way an older son should. He's been fulfilling his duty. He's been living up to the expectation. He's been trying his hardest. He's working in the field. When he comes near the house, it says he heard music and dancing. And I think in that moment, he becomes bitter and cynical and defensive before he even knows what's happening. because he calls to one of the servants and asks him, what is going on? It's like, there's something happening here, and I don't know about it. What is it? What have I been left out of? I've been over here working in the field, and there's this party going on, and I didn't know about the party. And like, hey, Dad, didn't you know that like the 2/3 remaining is my 2/3? Like, shouldn't I be involved in the planning and the discussion? And then he hears what's really happened. This servant comes to him and says, sure, like your brother's come home, he replied, and your father's killed the fattened calf. That's important because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. Yeah, I think if we're honest, this one might hit a little closer to home. At least it might hit a little closer to home for those of us who have been around the church for any period of time, maybe even for most of us regardless. Because the older son doesn't run away. The older son, like we've seen, like the older son does the thing. He stays, he works, he obeys, he does everything right. He's like, Dad, I've done all the things, I've checked all the boxes. But when he hears the music and then he realizes what's happening, he gets angry and he refuses to go in. He's bitter and he's resentful. He's like, how could any of this be happening? And at first, I think we kind of get it, don't we? Because his reaction sounds almost reasonable. Like, I've been here the whole time. I've done what's right. I've been faithful. Like, and this guy gets the party? Like, what? Shouldn't we be celebrating the good things? Like, what? I'm not sure what's happening. You can see it immediately. The older son, he gets defensive. What is happening? Why don't I know about it? Why didn't I have a say in this? And then he refuses to go in. The second slide for the father, we're jumping toward the end of the story here. Verse 29 says, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed you. Yet you never gave me even a young goat. It's like, that guy got the fattened calf. So here's the thing about the fattened calf. Fattened calf is reserved for usually a once-a-year celebration, probably the Day of Atonement. And so they would have been fattening this calf up for I don't know how calves are raised, but I'm going to go with an entire year, more than a year. They've been working this thing to an end with the goal in mind that this will be what we use to celebrate and party on the Day of Atonement when sins are forgiven. And he's like, Dad, you gave this guy who squandered 1/3 of your wealth that fattened calf that we were working on together. So you never even gave me a goat. It's not even a goat. It's a baby goat, actually. He's like, you didn't even give me a little goat. And the son, he's like, this son of yours squanders all your property. Look at this son. He doesn't even call him his brother. He's so checked out that he can't even recognize that it's his brother who has come home. He's like, Dad, this kid of yours, it's like parents, your daughter, your son, right? You know, like that never ends well. If you want listen, that's the cheapest piece of marriage advice that you can ever get. Don't do that. This son of yours squandered all your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. He doesn't deserve it. That's what this guy is feeling. And we can feel it too. Comparison, frustration, anger, bitterness, resentment, these things that creep in to our minds and our hearts. And here's how you know that it's happening in your heart. You start keeping score. You start keeping score of everything that you've done and everything that they've not done and all of the reasons why you deserve the things that you believe you deserve and all of the reasons why they do not. And it's like this ledger that goes back and forth in your mind, like I've done, you've not done, you don't deserve. And you and I, we can get pretty good at keeping score of other people's failures and what we think God owes us. The older son cannot experience the joy of his brother's return home because he is so blinded by his own resentment. And that's the reality. Joy and resentment cannot ever coexist. And sure, we can feel one and then the other. I'm not saying that you can't wrestle out complicated emotions and feelings. We can. But one will always crush the other. Resentment and bitterness will always crush any hope that joy has of having a home in your heart. The older son is just as lost. And actually, many theologians, many writers say the older son was more lost than the younger son. Because the difference is the younger son, he knows that he's lost. He's like, yep, I did all the things. None of it led to life. I need to go back and figure this out. The older son doesn't even see his own state or own reality. So the younger son, he's lost because he left home. The older son is lost even though he never left home. The older son, he doesn't want the joy of being with his brother, and he doesn't want the joy of being with his father. He just wants what he believes is his. He's still in the same way. The younger son, he wants the father for what the father is going to give him. And the older son, he's the exact same. The older son, he also wants the father for what the father is going to give him. He just goes about it a different way. The younger son, he shows up one bold, brash, kind of like line in the sand moment. He's like, Dad, give me my stuff. I'm going. And it happens. The older son, though, is still trying to get from his dad what he thinks he's owed. He's just doing it differently. He thinks that good behavior will be rewarded, that following all the rules to the letter of the law is exactly what he needs to do in order to get from his dad what he believes he is owed. And that's why the older son is so offended. He says, good behavior gets rewarded, not bad. Bad behavior ought to be punished. That makes sense. And we can live with that reality. I think many of us operate with that reality. We think good behavior ought to be rewarded and bad behavior ought to be punished, and never the two shall meet. In the middle, certainly not. Everything, make it make sense, please. Fred Craddock, he says, the embrace of the younger son, though, does not mean the rejection of the older son. And to take the parable right back to the beginning, the love of tax collectors and sinners that Jesus is demonstrating does not negate or cancel out the love of the Pharisees and the scribes. Such is God's love, he says. But we find it difficult not to be offended by God's grace toward another, especially when we have serious questions about that person's conduct and character, and you see it and you feel it, and maybe you've experienced it, maybe you have received it, been on the receiving end of it, and maybe, if you're honest, you've been on the giving end of it. Good behavior ought to be rewarded, bad behavior ought to be punished, and everything makes sense, and we can be happy and just keep on moving on with our ledger. But grace in this story breaks the system that the older and younger son have both been living under. And grace breaks and needs to break the system that we've been living in too. And it's only the grace of a loving father. So let's look at the father. It says, while he was still, so this is the younger son. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him. It was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him while he was still a long way off. Don't miss that one line. Like, this father's been waiting for his kid, and maybe you as a father, as a mother, have been waiting for your kid. You better believe if you're waiting for your kid that you're not waiting from a distance. You are watching, and you are praying, and you are hoping, and you are every single day thinking about that day. Here's this father who's watching for his son, so much so that while the son is still a long way off, his father sees him, he's filled with compassion for him, and he runs to his son, throws his arms around him, and kisses him, and we think, great, happiness, family, big family ending to the whole story. The father's filled with compassion. Here's the shocking thing. the father runs to his son. Now, I'm not going to ask, how many of you like running? How many of you don't like running? We could argue about that forever. Some of us love and hate running at the same time while we're doing it. We hate that we're running while we're running. But here's Jewish fathers in Jesus' day did not run, period. It was a shameful act. It was something that kids did. It was something that women did. But fathers, men, did not run. And again, you don't have to like it, but that's just the way it was. So for this dad to see his kid and run, what's happening? He has to hike up his long cloak that he's wearing. He's got to expose a shameful part of his body to others in the community and then take off running for everybody to see to get to his kid. This dad is accepting shame, the shame of a community, for the sake of saving his son. It's not just for a happy ending. It's not just so that emotions can be high and good. We can feel good about the story. He's doing it because he knows that he's the only one who can save his son. Again, Kenneth Bailey, theologian, studies the stories of Jesus and the stories and practices within Middle Eastern culture. His take about this is that there was a practice in a community where if a kid did this, if a son did this, took his inheritance, left the community, squandered it among the Gentiles, those who were not Jews, and then came back, that community would and should go to the city gates. We would all gather, be like, guess what's happening? Guess who's coming back? We'd go to the city limits, and we would stop the son from entering. And it was you'd fill a pot with some stuff, and you'd break it at their feet, and then there'd be some words that would be spoken. And essentially what those words were you are cut off forever. And that community, it was that community's responsibility to prevent the son from coming home, and it was that community's responsibility to cut him off forever. Could never come back. If he did, if he tried, more serious consequences. And so the father runs because he knows he has to get there first. He's got to get there ahead of the other community members. He's got to get there ahead of his other family. He's got to get there ahead of anybody else because he's the only one who can restore that kid back into the family. He's the only way that that kid's getting back into town. He's the only way that that kid is going to be saved. And so he runs so that he can get there first. And there he goes. Before an apology, before a speech, before anything has been made right, he throws his arms around him and he kisses him. And then the son goes, he's like, Dad, I've got this plan, and I know I abandoned you, and I know that I've dishonored our family, and I know I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And he's like, Dad, listen, I'll pay everything back. He's mid-sentence. The father said to his servants, Dad's not even looking at the son anymore. He's not even listening. He's like, I don't care about your plan, kid. Your last plan didn't go so well, so no more planning for you. But he turns to his servants. He says, quick, bring the best robe. So here's this kid. He's lost everything. Bring the best robe. Do you know whose robe that would be in a household? It'd be the father's, his own. Say, bring this kid my own robe, the sign of the family. Put a ring on his finger. Again, that is the ring signifying your belonging to a family. Put it on his finger, and then put sandals on his feet. Give him the things that make him not a slave, not a servant, not a day worker. Give him the things that make him a son. The father, before the kid can even finish, he can even get it out, is welcoming him back into not just the household, but his full status as son. Everything he was as son, he is as son. Again, son starts his plan. The father doesn't let him finish. Because again, the son is still trying to earn what has to only be received as a gift from God. Quick, bring the best robes, not just any robes, but the best ones, and bring a ring and put it on his finger and give this kid his sign of authority and identity back. Remind everybody who this kid is, and put sandals on his feet because servants don't wear sandals, sons do. The father restores him, and they celebrate. Let's have a feast, he says. Let's party. This son of mine was dead, and he's alive. He's lost, and he's found, so they began to celebrate. And in the middle of celebrating, you can link that meanwhile, right? In the meantime or meanwhile, the older son, he's still outside the party. He's not entered in. He's sitting there in the bitterness and in the resentment. And what I want us to see is just like the father goes out to meet the younger son, the father goes out to meet the older son. So his father went out and pleaded with him for a father to leave probably what is the biggest party he's ever thrown in his entire life. For the host of that party just to leave would be shameful, was seen as a shameful act. Nobody does it. So early on in Jesus' ministry, there's a party, and the party's going on, and they run out of wine, right? So Jesus' mom is like, hey, dude, you know what to do here. Like, come on, like, do the thing. And what they're trying to do is prevent shame from falling on the hosts of the party. And so for this father to go out is to, again, absorb the full blow of shame. He's going to leave his own party to run after his son. He says, my son, the father said, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. The older brother's status is secure. He says, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. Everything I have. Father reaffirms his sonship. But then he says, we had to celebrate this because your brother was dead, but he's alive. He's lost, and he is now found. God is not standing at a distance, waiting for you to fix yourself. And God is not keeping score, waiting to see if you've done enough, and wondering if maybe today will be the day. God's not saying to you, come back when you've earned it. He's not saying to you, go and figure out a job, pay me back for everything that I've done. God is the Father on this road, running to you. And God is the Father who leaves the party, moving toward you. So that what? So that you would be brought in. So that you would be included. And some of our stories, like that silly opening line, some of our stories are still unresolved. Some of us are still in the distant country. We're still in the far-off land, and we assume, like, if I go back, I'm going to be rejected. You don't know what I've done. If you knew, you know, even that loving Father, he's not going to accept me. Like, I've gone too far. And some of us are standing outside the party. And we assume, like, I thought we earned our way into this thing. Like, what happened? I'm not experiencing the love and the joy of this Father, even though I've been doing the right thing all the way. And so we are resentful, and we're angry and bitter, and we're wondering, like, when will it be my turn? When and how? What do I have to do to earn my way into this party? And both approaches are wrong. Because again, this isn't a story about two sons. It's a story of a father's unending love for you. And it's God's story of his unending love for you. This is Jesus' story. This is Jesus who takes on the full weight of guilt and shame and sadness and sorrow and rejection so that you can be welcomed in. And so that you can know God's unending and deep and faithful love for you. And so here's my invitation. Stop running. Stop performing. Stop trying to earn what God longs to give you. Let's pray. God, we all of us are in need of your love. We all need your forgiveness. God, each of us in our own way, we run off to this far and distant land, and each of us in our own way, we stand outside the party and we're filled with bitterness and anger and resentment, like wondering, when will it be my turn? And to both of us, like to both of those camps, to both of those approaches, you say, stop running and stop earning. Sit and rest and receive and accept my love. And so, God, that's the message that so many of us need to hear today. That's the message that so many of us long to know deep in our hearts and our minds, that we are loved beyond measure, that we belong and have an identity that is safe and secure, and we have vocation, that we have tasks and jobs and things that you call us to do that matter and that impact this world. But God, so many of us are stuck. And so many of us are stuck either because we think we've wandered too far and we're too far gone. And like, if you only knew, God, thanks that you do know. You still call us loved. And some of us are stuck because we're standing outside in our bitterness and our resentment. And God, thanks that you say to us, you're loved. And so, God, in these next few moments, I would invite and pray that you would speak to us and remind us of where we are, and that you'd remind us that we are loved. And God, as we're praying, and as you're speaking to us, and as we continue to sing, and as we continue to worship and go and then party and celebrate in our own way, God, I pray you continue to work in our hearts and our minds. And so as we're praying, and we've not done this in a long time, but as your eyes are closed and as your heads are bowed, I want to just say simply to you, I know that there are some of you out there who feel like you are too far gone and who are too lost. And if you feel like you actually this day want to make a commitment to follow Jesus and say, Jesus, I'm going to come back home, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what that means, but I know I need to experience your love. If you just want to lift your hand, I want to connect with you. And there are some of us here who are filled with bitterness and resentment. And if that's you, like if you feel like, man, I've been standing on the outside of the party and I've been doing the thing and I've been coming to church, and I know that I need to recommit my life in some way, whatever that language works for you. But if that's you, if you're standing here and you're going like, oof, I know that I need God's love and I need to surrender some bitterness and resentment, I'd invite you to just to lift your hand. God, thanks that you know us and you love us. And thanks that you speak these words. You are my beloved. You are my son. You are my daughter whom I love. Everything I have is yours. And so I just want you to know, if you raised your hand, we are celebrating with you. We love you. God sees you and God knows you. You can put your hands down. And together, we're going to celebrate that. Let's pray. God, thanks for your love and your grace that you speak over us. Send us from this place now. I pray all of us changed and challenged. And God, for those sitting here raising hands, and for those of us sitting here not raising hands, but knowing that you're speaking something to us, continue to do that. God, thanks that we're yours. We rejoice and we celebrate at lives that are being transformed because of Jesus. And we pray these things in the strongest name of Jesus. Amen.